You're seeing this message right now not because of coincidence, not because of timing, and not because you randomly clicked something. You're seeing it because something inside you has been shifting quietly, consistently, and deeply, long before your conscious mind noticed. People always say life speaks in subtle ways, but what they don't tell you is that when the subtle messages are ignored for too long, the psyche becomes louder. It begins to send signals through discomfort, through strange synchronicities, through emotions you can't explain, and through a sense that you're no longer fitting inside the person you used to be. That feeling you've been waking up with, the one you can't describe properly, the one that feels like a mixture of heaviness, confusion, and curiosity. That feeling is the earliest sign that something within you has begun to move. You didn't come across this because you were searching for change. The truth is, change was already happening, and you were searching for clarity. Something in your life has been pulling at the seams for a while. Maybe it's the way certain relationships suddenly feel different. Maybe it's the way your routine no longer gives you the sense of purpose it used to. Or maybe it's the quiet truth you've been trying to avoid. The version of you that once carried you through life has reached its limit. It has done its job. It has taken you as far as it could. And now you're at a point where the old identity is loosening, slipping, and dissolving. Whether you're ready for it or not, there comes a moment in every person's life when the soul begins to question the role they've been playing. Most people mistake this moment for depression, burnout, or confusion. But Jung believed it is something far deeper. He called it the moment the unconscious begins knocking. Not to break your life apart, but to break your illusions apart. When the identity you've been wearing no longer matches the truth of who you are inside, the psyche starts creating friction. You feel pulled toward things you can't explain. You feel repelled by things you used to tolerate. Your emotions become unpredictable, your motivations shift, and suddenly, the life you built feels like a costume that no longer fits your skin. You've felt this. That's why you're here. And whether you admit it or not, you've been sensing that your inner world is no longer aligned with the outer world you've been living in. You've been noticing signs, small, quiet, almost invisible to others, but unmistakable to you. People you once trusted seem distant. Goals you once chased no longer spark anything inside you. Activities that used to satisfy you leave you empty. And most importantly, there's a voice inside you. A whisper that grows stronger when everything else becomes silent, telling you that your life cannot continue exactly as it has been. Maybe the shift began when something in your life broke. Or maybe it began when something didn't break, but your spirit did. Sometimes the transformation begins in moments of loss, disappointment, or betrayal. Other times it begins quietly, without drama, without a major event. Just a subtle understanding that you're no longer who you were. But what's happening inside you is not random. According to Jung, when your conscious mind is no longer aligned with your deeper self, the unconscious begins creating synchronicities, moments that feel too meaningful to be accidents. A sudden thought, a sudden encounter, a sudden message appearing at the exact time your inner world becomes unbearable. It's not magic. It's psychology. It's the unconscious speaking through patterns that match your emotional state. Right now, you're in the early stages of this psychological shift. And what makes this stage so difficult is not the change itself, but the uncertainty. You don't know what you're transforming into. You don't know what the final outcome will be. You only know that the old way feels wrong, heavy, and outdated. This is why so many people mistake spiritual awakening for crisis, because the first stage feels like losing control. You feel as if you're drifting away from old identities, old habits, old connections. But you haven't yet discovered what's meant to replace them. You've probably been feeling a kind of emotional contradiction. Some days you feel strangely inspired, like something is waiting for you. And other days you feel exhausted, lost, or disconnected. This inner contradiction is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of transition. The psyche doesn't transform in a straight line. It transforms through tension, through discomfort, through internal conflict. When one part of you is dying and another part is trying to be born, the soul enters a state of quiet turbulence. This turbulence is not here to break you. It's here to prepare you. There's a reason your emotions have become unpredictable. Your old emotional patterns were built for a version of you that no longer exists. When that identity starts dissolving, the emotional structure built around it collapses too. You might feel confused about your purpose, unsure about your relationships, unsure about what you even want anymore. But confusion is not the enemy here. Confusion is the bridge between your old self and your emerging self. Confusion is the mind's natural response to inner evolution. You're not lost. You're transitioning. And as this transition unfolds, you'll notice something else. Your tolerance for certain things has changed. You can't tolerate certain behaviors anymore. You can't tolerate certain environments. You can't tolerate being emotionally undervalued. You can't tolerate the version of you that kept shrinking just to maintain peace. The psyche refuses to let you live small once it has tasted the truth of who you're meant to be. You might try to force yourself back into old habits, but the discomfort will return every time. Because once the shift begins, there's no going back. You're not imagining this. Something is changing inside you. Something is waking up. Something is pulling you forward, even if you don't know where it's leading. And when the unconscious begins to move, the external world mirrors it. That is why you're here, right now, listening, reading, absorbing something that resonates deeper than logic. You didn't find this message. It found you. You didn't seek it. Your inner world pulled it into your outer world at the exact moment you needed it. This is not the end of your story. This is the beginning of the moment you recognize that a shift has already started. A shift you cannot stop. A shift you weren't meant to stop. And the more you become aware of it, the more clearly you'll see that your life is no longer random. Every moment, every feeling, every discomfort has been preparing you. You're entering a psychological threshold. And whether you realize it or not, this threshold is leading you toward the person you were always meant to become. You've noticed it. Even if you haven't fully admitted it to yourself yet, the structures you once relied on have stopped holding you the way they used to. The routines that once gave you a sense of stability now feel mechanical. The roles you played so effortlessly now feel heavy, scripted, and strangely disconnected from who you are becoming. This is the stage where the psyche begins to dismantle everything that is no longer aligned with your internal truth. It's not destruction for the sake of destruction. It's a collapse with intention. A collapse that happens when the energy that maintained your old identity reaches its limit. Identity reaches its limit. There is a word Jung used to describe this moment: saturation. Saturation is the point where your psyche no longer has the strength or belief needed to maintain the illusion of who you used to be. You may feel emotionally drained without knowing why. You may feel as if you're pretending when you talk, pretending when you smile, pretending when you socialize, pretending when you try to act like everything is fine. It's because the old identity is running on empty. The emotional fuel that once powered your personality is gone. Not because you failed, but because you've outgrown it. People think psychological collapse looks dramatic or sudden. Most of the time it doesn't. Most of the time it's subtle. It begins with a quiet disconnection, a slow unraveling, a loss of interest in things that once mattered, a noticeable distance from the version of you that used to feel natural. And then, all at once, you realize you can't go back to who you were, but you don't yet know who you're supposed to be. That space in between, the space where your old identity is dissolving and your new one hasn't formed yet, is where you are right now. You might be asking yourself why everything feels heavier than it used to, why you get irritated more quickly, why simple tasks feel overwhelming, why conversations drain you instead of energizing you. It's because the persona, The social mask you've worn for years is cracking. The psyche is refusing to let you continue living in a way that contradicts your inner truth. And every time you try to return to old patterns, the discomfort grows stronger. That discomfort isn't punishment, it's guidance. It's your unconscious, pulling you away from what is no longer aligned with you. What's happening inside you right now is not random. It's part of a psychological law Jung called enantiodromia, the process where something, when pushed to its extreme, transforms into its opposite. When you spend too much time being overly agreeable, the suppressed parts of you begin rising with force, boundaries, anger, self-respect. When you spend too much time being overly rational, the emotional self you buried begins breaking through. When you've lived your life for others for too long, the neglected voice of your authentic self becomes impossible to silence. You might feel like you're becoming someone you don't recognize. That's because your shadow, the part of you that has been hidden, ignored, or suppressed, is emerging. Not to create chaos, but to restore balance. The psyche doesn't operate on the ego's timeline. It operates on truth. And when the ego refuses to listen, the unconscious becomes louder. This is why you've been feeling things intensely. This is why certain situations trigger you more than they used to. This is why you're noticing parts of yourself you thought didn't exist. Your emotions might feel unpredictable, like they're shifting from one extreme to another. One moment you want to be alone, the next you crave connection. One moment you feel motivated, the next you want to escape everything. This fluctuation is not instability. It's a sign that your internal world is reorganizing itself. It's a sign that your psyche is trying to rebalance years of suppressed emotions, desires, and truths. The collapse you feel is not the end of something meaningful. It's the end of something limiting. And yet, even as this breakdown happens, you still try to maintain control. You try to fix things internally by using old strategies: distraction, avoidance, numbing, overthinking, forcing yourself to stay strong. But these coping mechanisms don't work anymore because they were created by the version of you that is dissolving. The psyche is not asking you to be strong right now. It's asking you to be honest. Honest about what hurts. Honest about what you want. Honest about what you can no longer carry. You might feel guilty for wanting to change. You might feel guilty for outgrowing people, relationships, or dreams you once cherished. But understand this: nothing real is lost in this process. Only illusions are. Only identities that were built on fear, obligation, or survival fall apart. The parts of you that were rooted in authenticity remain. They grow, they expand. They become the foundation of your next chapter. During this stage, many people resist the transformation. They cling to the familiar, even if it's painful. Not because they want to suffer, but because uncertainty feels terrifying. The mind prefers known pain over unknown freedom. But the truth is, the more you resist this shift, the more intense your internal conflict becomes. Emotional heaviness grows, synchronicities intensify. Situations arise that force you to confront what you've been avoiding. The psyche keeps moving you forward, even when you try to hold yourself back. This is why everything feels amplified lately: your emotions, your sensitivity, your intuition. You're noticing things you used to ignore. You're feeling things you used to suppress. You're questioning things you once accepted without thinking. You're becoming conscious of your unconscious. And that awareness is the beginning of transformation. There's something else happening beneath the surface. Your values are changing. You're no longer motivated by the same things. You no longer want the things you used to chase. You no longer feel satisfied by superficial rewards, shallow connections, or external validation. What used to excite you now feels empty because your soul is demanding something deeper, something more real, something aligned with who you're meant to be. As this shift intensifies, you will notice an internal pull, a desire to detach from certain environments, to create space, to breathe. You may feel the urge to isolate, not out of sadness, but out of self-preservation. Your psyche needs silence. It needs space to reassemble itself. It needs distance from the noise of old patterns. This withdrawal isn't giving up. It's a natural part of psychological rebirth. And somewhere inside you, even through the confusion, a small part of you knows this is necessary. A part of you knows that the life you've been living was too small for who you're meant to become. You can feel it. Something is trying to emerge. Something is trying to break through. And the collapse you're experiencing is not the collapse of your life. It's the collapse of the version of you that was built for survival, not for authenticity. What's coming next will ask more from you, but it will also give more to you. You are entering the stage where the psyche begins preparing you for rebirth. Not a return to who you were, but a transformation into someone deeper, stronger, clearer, and more aligned with your truth. And even if you feel lost right now, even if you feel unsure, even if you feel like everything inside you is breaking apart, remember this one truth: collapse is not the end. Collapse is the doorway. There comes a moment in every transformation when the old self doesn't simply weaken, it dies. Not in the dramatic, catastrophic way people imagine, but quietly, internally, almost invisibly. It dissolves. It loses its grip on your identity. It fades like a story you no longer relate to. And even though this process is natural, it rarely feels comfortable. It feels like you're losing control, losing clarity, losing the sense of who you are. But what you're actually losing is the persona you were never meant to carry forever. Psychological death is the moment where the old version of you can no longer survive the truth that is emerging from within. Everything that once defined you, your habits, your beliefs, your emotional reactions, your patterns, stops being instinctive. You pause before doing things that once felt automatic. You question impulses that used to control you. You notice the gap between who you've been and who you're becoming. And in that gap, something powerful is taking shape. It's normal. If you feel like you're floating between worlds right now, like you're not fully in the past but not fully in the future either, this in-between space is sacred. It is the psychological womb where the new self develops. Your old identity had years, sometimes decades, to build itself. It's natural that the new one needs time to form. But before it does, you must pass through the void. The void is the space where nothing feels stable. You may feel unmotivated, disconnected, or emotionally neutral. You may feel like you're observing your life from the outside. You may feel a strange sense of emptiness that you can't explain. This emptiness isn't a sign that something is wrong with you. It's a sign that the energy once used to maintain your old identity is now being redirected. The psyche has gone silent, not because you've lost yourself, but because it's creating space for something new to grow. In this stage, your mind will try to cling to the familiar. It may try to pull you back into old patterns, old relationships, old beliefs, simply because they feel safer than the unknown. But each time you attempt to return to who you were, you'll feel a subtle resistance, a heaviness, a sense that you're going backward. That resistance is your psyche's way of protecting you from falling into old traps. The psychological death of your former self means those patterns no longer have authority over you. You may revisit them, but they can no longer define you. As the old identity dissolves, your intuition sharpens. You begin noticing things you once ignored. People's intentions become clearer. Your emotional boundaries become more instinctive. You start recognizing what drains you and what nourishes you. This clarity isn't something you create. It's something that emerges naturally when the noise of your false identity disappears. You're beginning to see life without the lenses of fear, pleasing, or survival. You're seeing life as it is. And more importantly, you're seeing yourself as you are. But make no mistake, this stage can feel lonely. When you begin shedding the layers that once defined you, it's common to feel misunderstood, disconnected, or unseen by the world around you. Not because you've isolated yourself, but because you're no longer resonating with the same frequency. The people who once felt familiar may now feel distant. The conversations you once enjoyed may now feel shallow. The environments that once comforted you may now feel restrictive. This is the natural result of psychological rebirth. You are outgrowing your former life, and the space around you hasn't adjusted yet. During this transformation, your dreams may intensify. Jung believed the unconscious speaks most clearly during times of psychological shift. You may see symbols, places, or faces that feel meaningful. You may wake up with insights you didn't consciously think of. This inner guidance is not imagination, it is communication. Your unconscious is guiding you toward a more authentic version of yourself, one that your conscious mind hasn't fully understood yet. You may also feel a growing desire for solitude. Not loneliness, but intentional separation. You may find yourself craving silence, reflection, or space from external expectations. This is because your psyche needs room to rebuild. Noise interrupts transformation. Distraction delays clarity. The new identity requires stillness to form. And even if you don't seek solitude consciously, life often creates it for you. Plans fall through, old connections fade, routines shift. Nothing is random in this stage. As you move deeper into this process, you'll notice something subtle but profound. The emotional wounds you've carried for years begin to lose their power. The memories that once triggered you soften. The insecurities that once controlled you weaken. The fears that once made you shrink begin dissolving. This isn't because you're ignoring them, it's because you're integrating them. Individuation, the core of Jung's philosophy, is the process of becoming whole. And wholeness doesn't come from rejecting your pain. It comes from acknowledging it and reclaiming the power you once gave away. You'll begin to see your past differently. Not as something that broke you, but as something that shaped your depth, your empathy, your awareness. The experiences that once wounded you become the foundation of your wisdom. The parts of yourself you once judged become aspects you learn to understand. And the mistakes you once resented become stepping stones that led you to the version of yourself emerging now. You may even feel a shift in your desires. What you want from life begins to change. You no longer feel drawn to superficial goals. You no longer feel compelled to impress people. You no longer want to betray yourself just to keep peace. You begin craving authenticity, depth, alignment, and inner harmony. You begin wanting a life that feels true, not a life that simply looks acceptable. This shift in desire is the clearest sign that psychological rebirth has begun. Then, slowly, without forcing anything, something awakens. A sense of inner strength you forgot you had. A new voice inside you, quiet but firm. A sense of direction that doesn't come from external approval, but from internal knowing. You start making different choices, not because you're trying to change, but because you can't pretend anymore. You stop shrinking yourself to fit old environments. You stop entertaining habits that drain you. You stop accepting narratives that never belonged to you. You begin choosing yourself in ways the old version of you never could. And then, one day, almost unexpectedly, you realize you're not lost anymore. You realize you're not breaking down, you're breaking open. You realize that everything you thought was falling apart was actually falling into place. The confusion begins to fade. The heaviness begins to lift. The inner fog begins to clear. And you start recognizing the version of yourself you were always meant to become. This is the beginning of individuation. The beginning of inner alignment. The beginning of living from truth instead of fear. From authenticity instead of survival. It won't feel perfect at first. Rebirth is gradual, but you will feel a new sense of stability, one that doesn't depend on external validation. You'll feel a new sense of clarity, one that doesn't require overthinking. You'll feel a new sense of peace, one that comes from being whole, not from being perfect. And if you're seeing this now, It's because your psyche is telling you that your transformation is already happening. You're not behind. You're not failing. You're not falling apart. You are crossing the threshold into a deeper version of yourself. A version that is more aware, more grounded, more truthful, and more powerful than anything you've ever been. Nothing about this moment is random. Nothing about your shift is accidental. You're here because your unconscious guided you here. You're here because you're ready. You're here because the old you has completed its purpose, and the new you is beginning to breathe. Your rebirth has already started. It's time to step into it. It's time to step into it.